Welcome to Tech London, a show featuring interviews with London's top creative entrepreneurs, startups, investors, design agencies, internet marketers, and freelancers that make up the Tech London online community, which mostly lives on the Slack instant messaging platform. We rotate through both hosts and guests for these interviews, so you have the chance to hear from multiple perspectives on London's tech scene.
Hello, folks, and welcome to this episode of the Tech London podcast. So, in the studio today is Suzanne. So, Suzanne, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
I'm known for three things. I'm known because I work in the world of people over 50, and I have both a not-for-profit and a for-profit, both in the do-gooding world. That are about supporting people over 50s. I'm known for being a dirty blues and jazz singer part-time, and I perform around London when it's post-COVID, of course, or otherwise in my little studio at home. And I used to have an app called Frugal, which is still a business, but started in 2014. So I've been around the London startup scene since, for the past 7 years now. So some people still know me from Frugal. And in fact, I got a Google alert the other day that was talking about Frugal, the app, and about how I was like one of the top 10 startup women in London. And I just thought, is this an old article? And then I realized, no, it was just somebody who just was really lazy and hadn't done their homework and just scraped something else probably.
Those I never trust those any top 10 of anything, because they're either engineered by PR companies. So I could be one of the top 10 London podcasters if you spoke to the right person, which is very inaccurate, or they're put together by your mates and or on legacy stuff. If you appeared high enough for enough days back in 2008, you can be an innovator in the London tech scene. I want to jump I'm really interested in the whole, we were talking before we came onto the podcast about the perception of the startup world and the place of, I don't want to say the place of old people in it, because that sounds terrible. That's exactly not what I mean. But what do you think the perception at the moment, like in 2021, is of the startup scene in London? Is it for a particular demographic, or what's the image do you think we have?
I suspect the startup scene. I'm a member of lots of startup groups, and I have seen over the years that it has definitely become more diverse, especially around women. So I've definitely seen. I was part of a group that started a number of years ago, back in. 6 or so years ago, that started off on a Google sheet called Ada's List. And that group of women working in tech has definitely grown to quite a substantial size. And that's really healthy and great. It's just great. And I've seen more diversity, but I suspect from what I'm seeing still in the funding world, that it is still primarily men who most probably came from a finance background, worked at Deloitte or Morgan Stanley or PwC or EY, places like that, who are still primarily the ones who seem to get the most attention and the most money.
How do we, when I say we, I mean like you and me and everyone else listening to this, like how do we let this still happen? Because it seems like, I'm really, I follow, the global co-working conversation a lot. And there's a group called Women in Co-work, and they're almost like they're an industry networking group for women that run co-working spaces, but they almost have to act like a social justice activist campaign. And there's been a lot of stuff I followed, particularly over the lockdown period of now events are online. There's no excuse not to have a very diverse panel, and there's still so many things you go to. There's like, you know what a manel is? I guess
no.
A manel is like a panel of men talking about business. So,
Oh, man, I'll use that one. That's good.
I love it. So there's I don't know, just people, particularly in, I'd say, like you said, in startups and business, there's some people that make a huge effort, and there's some people that just have a group of men like me talking about startups because they're there. But do you feel like you're fighting for older folk, or how do you refer to that? If I say older folk, is that the
yeah,
the
we
right
call ourselves?
pronoun?
I call myself an older. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very complex issue, and it's not easy to solve and it's very understandable, having been in it for a while. And what I see is that most people generally will invest, if we're talking about money, most people generally will invest in people that they recognize as being a bit like themselves. So they're easy to understand. And their problems are easy to understand because they might be problems that the person who's providing them with the money has experienced or has some knowledge of. So it's easy to write checks if you're in a world where the people that you're talking to are very similar to yourself, and that, it's all very clear to you, right? But when you're talking about problems that affect people unlike yourself, and the people writing checks are unlike yourself, then there's a disconnect. And we see that every day, right? We see that, there is a lack of representation in the VC world of women. There's a lack of representation in the VC world of people of color. There's a total lack of representation in the VC world of older people. And there's a lack of money and capital generally available just pretty much throughout all, whether you're white, brown, whatever color you happen to be. If you're in the very early stage and you might need a bit of cash just to validate what you're doing, because even though, as we know, you can build a website using Squarespace or Wix or WordPress or whatever, Bubble, in the case of the website that I'm working on, Nestful, it still requires cash to be able to access your audience, your prospective customer. And as much as you may try and quote unquote growth hack that with whatever means you have available to you for no money, when you're in a city like London, and this has certainly been my experience over the past 7 years, it's really hard to reach enough people, really, really, really hard in a city with millions and millions of people without money. It's just really tough. So I think everyone struggles in the early days, but I suspect that the reason why younger white men are more successful is because there's more access to capital from white men.
There is. It's unbelievable.
But I don't kind of blame them. I mean, I don't, I think it's unfortunate, but equally it's unfortunate that more women don't want to be in this, space, right? And there's not more women trying, or more people of color trying to be VCs. Maybe there are, and I don't see them. It's hard for them to raise enough money, right, to get their foot in the door. And I've seen this more recently with someone that I've been dealing with who's told me about a woman trying to raise capital to help people that are serving older people like myself, and is still trying to get the fund together, right? So it is difficult, but I also realize that we're not all VC investable, and that's also something that you have to get to grips with. That if ultimately you are running a lifestyle business, then maybe it is going to be more difficult to get the capital that you need.
There is because I'm part of a project called the Co-working Idea Project, which is around inclusion, diversity, accessibility, and equity. And it's taken a long time to find out how other people feel, and I'm still learning, so I'm not going to make any huge announcements or assumptions. But one of the things that comes across is that when you're not a white man like me, life is way more exhausting So, I can go and there's a lot of things that, I went to a good school, just met loads and loads of people. So life is, nearly effortless for me. And for females or people of color, I know they have to work like, I don't know what the actual data is, but they have to work harder than I do just to do things. And there's a article I was reading which was about women going for investment. And it goes back to what you say. So there's a bit more to it than all white men are evil. But when this female went into a room for venture capital and took a man with her, she got more funding. And there's some. I'm going to see if I can look and find it and put it in the show notes. But someone just collected some data on this, and it's like woman walking into a room to pitch, not very good results. Woman walking into a room with a man to pitch, great results.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's loads of statistics to prove that if you are a single female founder, it is very, very challenging to raise money, more so than if you are a single male founder. That's for certain. And I'm always surprised that there are clearly, there are massive problems that need solving at all stages of life. And one of the things that has surprised me as I'm emerging from my menopausal stage of life is that only now does it appear that there's some attention being given to a stage of a woman's life that lasts for a decade and can seriously impact on her ability to function in the most basic ways, right? Just the ability to be able to go to work and not suffer brain fog or, break out in a sweat every 5 minutes or just feel generally crap. And this stage of a woman's life has been in existence for pretty much forever. And yet it's only now that there's some capital being made available to start looking at this particular stage of life and how some of these issues might be addressed. Meanwhile, on the other hand, and sorry to get a bit graphic with this one, but you look at men just as a group, right? And you think they get to a certain stage of life and there's some stuff that happens to them, mostly downstairs, right? And yet there is no shortage of medication on the market that you can now go into Boots and easily access. No shortage of companies addressing that very one specific issue, right, that men have. No shortage of capital that's being, thrown at literally at solving that one specific problem. And you think, that just seems ridiculous. I mean, it's insane when you think about it. It's so nuts. But clearly, the people that are handing out the drugs and the money for all of that stuff has gone, this is a big problem, guys. Like we gotta sort this one out. Whereas women are going, what about us? We have a decade of just living through hell.
It's because it doesn't occur to like I don't know, just to get even more graphic, so I was there for the birth of my child, and I just, I've got a whole new take on what my wife has to go through for us to have our son, but until you you might know about it and see it in, we all saw Friends and Jennifer Aniston giving birth on Friends, and you kind of, it's like a sort of funny thing, but until you don't know it's true to you, it happens to you. Do you happen to know Kate Usher, who writes a lot about, I'll put a link in the show notes, folks. She writes a lot about menopause and
yes, I read her thing on I saw a Guardian piece on her on the weekend. Yeah,
she's great.
Yeah, she's amazing. But I mean, these sorts of people, I've been mentoring a woman who's got a big community around menopause, and she's now she's realized that the not-for-profit world is really difficult. And she's now going into the corporate environment with her workshops just to educate employers as to how they can support women through this stage of their life, right? Because again, they're realizing that they do have a responsibility in the same way that when women are pregnant, they have a responsibility to understand that they might need a bit of time off and all of that. So, yeah, but this, it's amazing when you think about the fact that women have been experiencing these different challenges throughout their life, from puberty to, giving birth and menopause and all of that sort of stuff. And yet there's so little money really spent on supporting them through any of this. Whereas, as I just said, as soon as a man has a little problem, it's just gotta sort that out.
What is so talking of men the wrong side of 40 or 50, how does startup school for seniors happen? Because that when I saw your little thing came through, that and I know we've got this way into the podcast and we're only just bringing it up, but that really got my attention, because there is kind of like in co-working, the average, I don't know what it is this year, but like the average age of a co-working member is 38, and the age that most people start a business is way higher than I would say the public perception is. Everyone thinks it's, because you hear about the 18-year-old guy starting, mega corp from his phone in a telephone box, but can you explain a bit more about the I don't know, life later in starting up? Because it's way bigger than we think it is, I would venture to suggest.
I mean, I started working in this area in 2017, actually, with somebody who had funded my first startup, Frugal, and she had been doing this work with young mothers. And we were thinking about whether this would work for older people. And the reason why was that I was starting to see that my friends, mainly in middle management, were losing their jobs and were struggling to find a new job. And when you've lost your job in later life, and perhaps you've been in the same job for a significant period of time, what I was seeing was that they were going through quite a big mental journey of thinking, what do I do now? What is left for me? Is there any value for me in the workplace anymore? Am I being valued in the workplace? So we set up this actually in-person program called the Business Academy, and we got a little bit of startup funding, pilot funding, set it up as a not-for-profit. And it was great. It worked really well. And actually I had dragged in some of my startup friends to appear on a panel and do a kind of Dragon's Den type panel at the end. And these were a group of people, mainly middle-class people who, for one reason or another, had found themselves out of work. And for some, it had come as a complete shock. And for some, they were just looking for a change of direction, something different to do. And I did that for a few years, went through various, metamorphosized into various different types of programs. I was really ready to give it up for a number of reasons. And that was mainly because I wasn't able to access the funding. And when we tried to offer a paid for program, it wasn't successful. And that could have been because for a number of reasons. But I do suspect that people my age have a massive fear of failure. That's what I've seen. And they didn't want to pay for a program they thought might not lead to a happy ending. Not the kind of happy ending that we know, but I
thought that. I was going to say it. Go on.
Anyway, then COVID came along. And suddenly we saw hundreds of thousands of people over 50 being made redundant or unemployed or furloughed. And that was being reported on. And that was the first time really that I'd started to see statistics around the scale of the problem. And a guy that had come to me about a year earlier, also interested in supporting over 50s, I said to him, should we apply for some cash to make this a digital program? Because obviously with COVID, we couldn't have it offline anymore. And he said, sure, let's put in an application. And if you get the money, yeah, I'd love to come and join you. So I put in an application through what was called London Community Response, which was basically organizations like ourselves who were not able to deliver in the same way because of COVID, transforming their delivery to, say, digital delivery. And I got that funding. And from that was in May of last year, from sort of May to September, when we launched our first program, we made over 25 hours of video content. I took all of my learning from being self-employed since my 20s. And Mark, who also spent a huge amount of time running businesses, actually had an exit from a unicorn, but now was a business coach, really a massive advocator of the lean business model and the lean canvas. We sort of took all of that methodology and threw it at this program and ran it from September to November, and about 40 people went through it, and it was amazingly successful. And we got these amazing testimonials. I was absolutely exhausted, and then we were procured to deliver it again through Hammersmith and Fulham Local Authority and Camden Giving. And now we're speaking to a range of local authorities and funders about how we can scale up the program and deliver that work on a more national level. And it's been transformative, not just for the participants, but for me, because I've been able to see how we can support people to start businesses that are not in the majority, these kind of ridiculous scale up businesses that that so many people are trying to create in Shoreditch and those kind of areas. But, just kitchen table businesses, people that have seen problems in the workplace and they want to be able to try and solve those, people who want to take the job they might have just been made redundant from and see if they can go self-employed as a consultant doing similar types of work. So it's been a very broad array of businesses that we've seen emerge from this program. But it's been, I suppose what surprises me the most is that people don't recognize how all of their years of experience in the workplace and just of being on the earth has contributed to what they know and what they can use when they start a business. I think so many of them come in feeling really low and, as I said before, just unable to see a positive future for themselves. And they leave feeling energized and positive and with a whole bunch of new skills and friends. And yeah, it's great.
With that little bit of transformation there, does that come, like, do you teach some magic formula and everyone goes, wow, I get it now? Or is it, how much of that, this is a really crap question, sorry. It's a great idea, but a crap question. How much of that comes from like people being with each other and going, oh yeah, I get that too, like recognizing themselves in each other?
It's a combination of factors. Part of it is the fact that Mark and I are in our 50s and 60s now. And so they recognize that we are totally relatable. I'm not one of those people who says, oh, I've made £1 million and I've done this and I drive a Maserati. I live in a flat in London and I still struggle in the same way that everybody who works for themselves struggles, especially in early stage businesses. So they can see that we're both completely relatable, and they can see that there's people around them who are in similar circumstances and they can relate to those people. And I suspect that they very rarely see people like themselves. And as you've acknowledged, the startup scene has a reputation for being full of young people. So they are generally feeling excluded from that world. And to find a place where they feel welcomed and supported and able to express, what they don't know and what they need to learn in a safe space is really great. And that's the kind of feedback that we get from people is, is that they find us inspirational and they just find the whole process very welcoming. And it's not fast paced. I mean, I think I have to stress that as well. It's not, I've been, I was on an incubator last year with Bethnal Green Ventures with my other startup. And, those kind of environments, very fast paced, you're kind of quite driven throughout the process. And that's great if you're a person that wants that kind of intense learning. But when you're in your 50s and 60s, a lot of those people are like, look, I didn't watch the videos this week, okay? And you're like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's okay. You can watch the videos next week. The videos are not going away, okay? It's perfectly okay. So they're being made to feel like they haven't failed just because they had, their mom had a fall or somebody needed attention in their family or something happened to them and they couldn't participate that week. It's like, it's okay. It's fine. Whereas, some of these other programs like Techstars and stuff, you'd think, well, probably wouldn't be so fine. Right.
So where is the, like in that first thing you said in Bethnal Green Ventures, why is it so fast paced and intense? Is it because I'm sort of wondering sometimes if we think that's how we have to act in those environments. So it is more fast paced and intense than it actually is because everyone thinks that that's what startup world is like.
In BGV, it's similar to Techstars in that it does come with funding. So there is an expectation with that money that you're going to carry on and continue to raise money because that's the world at which you are now in. You are now in, even though it's a fairly small amount of money, you are in the VC world. And therefore, the expectation in the VC world is throw cash at you, build fast, build smart, right? That is basically that world is, keep raising money and keep growing, keep testing. And so once you're in that world, I suspect the speed at which these programs is just getting you used to the speed that they want you to be at. That's just, they don't want somebody that's just kind of chugging along. They want people that want to build fast and smart. So yeah, I knew when I went into that program that was the expectation, and I was okay about that.
It is fun. Like if you end up in the, when I've ended up in some horrible fast paced environments, but when I found an environment that is fast paced, it's amazing. Like how much mental learning you can cover in such a short space of time. I've got my car on double yellow lines outside, so we're going to have to wrap up now. But where can people find you online, Susan? Your empire.
My empire. I have a website called suzannenoble.co.uk that sort of covers my life. And yeah, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn and Startup School for Seniors and Nestful. And my YouTube channel is just called Dirty Blues. And yeah, there's probably I counted 21 social media channels the other day. So there's so many different ways to find me.
It's just if you I used to say put Bernie into Google and it would come up Bernie Mac and then Bernie Sanders rose to fame. So now he obliterated my SEO ranking. But I really appreciate your time today, and I'm sure this won't be the first conversation we have like this. Thanks for listening in today, ladies and gentlemen, and subscribe all over the like Suzanne said, you'll find us on every little platform there. Thanks to Jonathan for producing this, and be careful out there. It is a jungle.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Tech London Show. If you're interested in joining the community or even making an appearance on this show, make sure you join our Slack group over at techlondon.io. Till next time.